It all started with an invitation from my ex-girlfriend, Rose. She had asked me over for dinner, and despite everything that had happened between us, I decided there was no harm in accepting. Dinner was surprisingly normal. We talked, laughed a little, and for a while I wondered whether perhaps we'd finally manage to put the past behind us. Then, without warning, I started feeling strange. My head became heavy, the room seemed to tilt, and I remember Rose telling me to lie down on the couch for a while. The next thing I knew, I was sitting on a wooden bench beneath a picnic pavilion in a park. Morning sunlight filtered through the trees. My head was pounding, and I had absolutely no idea how I'd gotten there. In my hand was a folded note. I opened it. Rory. Consider this payback. You embarrassed me horribly at that Halloween party, and then you walked away and left me to deal with the consequences by myself. So today, you're going to experience a little embarrassment of your own. I've arranged everything so you can't simply undo the prank and drive home. Your phone, wallet, and car keys are gone. Your house keys are in the bag beside you, so once you've completed your little walk, you can go home and change. You should be home in an hour or two. Enjoy the walk. Rose. I stared at the note in disbelief. Then I looked down at myself. Rose had apparently recreated the ridiculous costume she'd worn for Halloween, complete with an old-fashioned pink dress, lace trim, an enormous skirt, white tights, and uncomfortable black shoes with little straps around the ankles. My hair had been transformed into a ridiculous mass of tiny curls, and someone had gone to an absurd amount of trouble applying makeup to my face. Beside me was a small handbag containing my house keys, identification, and a few other things I might need. There was one more problem. My mouth was covered by an annoying prop from the costume that Rose had somehow secured in place. I immediately realized that trying to remove it was only going to make things worse. I sighed. Okay, Rose, I muttered. You win. There wasn't much point sitting there all morning. I picked up the handbag and started toward the park entrance. Walking was much harder than I'd expected. The shoes were uncomfortable, the ridiculous skirt kept getting in the way, and every few steps I could hear the faint swish of fabric. I kept my head down and hoped nobody would notice me. That lasted about 30 seconds. A jogger coming toward me slowed down, stared, and burst out laughing. Costume party, she called. I ignored her and kept walking. A few minutes later, a mother and her daughter entered the park. The little girl stared at me with enormous curiosity. Mom, why is that man dressed like that? Her mother quickly ushered her along. I wanted the ground to open up and swallow me. Finally, I escaped the park and reached the main road. I thought things would get easier. They didn't. Several passing drivers honked their horns. One person shouted something about needing a ride to the costume party. I kept walking without looking back. By the time I reached my neighborhood, I was exhausted. Unfortunately, this was where things became even worse. People were outside mowing lawns, gardening, washing cars, and generally enjoying the morning. And now every single one of them had something interesting to look at. I hurried down the street, desperately hoping to reach my house before anyone I actually knew saw me. Then I heard a car horn. I stopped. A familiar voice called out from behind me. Hey, Rory. Nice outfit. I slowly turned around. Rose was leaning out of the passenger side window of my current girlfriend Donna's car. Donna was behind the wheel, laughing so hard she could barely keep a straight face. Rose waved cheerfully. Need a ride? I shook my head furiously and continued toward my house. Are you sure? Rose shouted. It's a long walk. Donna honked the horn again. By now, several neighbors had come outside to see what was happening. One of them called out, Hi, Rory. I didn't answer. I reached my front door, pulled my keys from the handbag, unlocked it, and practically threw myself inside. I slammed the door behind me and leaned against it, breathing heavily. For several minutes, I simply stood there. Eventually, I pushed myself upright and began searching for the rest of the keys Rose had mentioned. Then my phone started ringing. I froze. It was Rose. I considered ignoring the call, but curiosity got the better of me. I answered. Hello. There was silence on the other end. Then Rose started laughing. Did you find the keys? I narrowed my eyes. Rose. She laughed even harder. Okay. Before you get mad, there's something you should know. I immediately became suspicious. What? There was another pause. Then she said, "You might want to check the kitchen." I looked toward the hallway. "What did you do?" Rose only laughed. And suddenly, I realized that the morning wasn't over yet. I gave Rose another frustrated grunt. She immediately burst out laughing. "I'll take that as a no," she said. "Okay, here's a clue. You scream, I scream, we all scream for." She laughed again. "Ice cream." Before I could respond, she hung up. I stood there staring at the phone. "Of course," I muttered. "Ice cream." I headed for the freezer and found exactly what I expected, a large plastic ice cream tub. Unfortunately, there was no ice cream inside. Instead, the container held a solid block of ice, and right in the middle of it was a ring of keys. "You have got to be kidding me." I dumped the frozen block onto the counter and began trying to figure out how to free the keys. My first attempt involved a hammer. That went nowhere. My second involved running warm water over the ice. That worked somewhat better, but it was painfully slow. Just when I thought things couldn't get any more ridiculous, someone knocked on the front door. I ignored it. The knocking came again. Then again. Finally, a voice called from outside. "Rory, I know you're in there." It was my neighbor Amy. I reluctantly opened the door. Amy stood there holding a tiny bottle. "Some girl gave me this," she said. "She told me you'd probably need it." I stared at the bottle. The label claimed it was designed to safely remove adhesive residue. Amy looked at me, then at my ridiculous costume. Then she noticed my painted nails. She raised an eyebrow. "Wow. You really committed to the costume." I sighed. "You have no idea." After carefully helping me remove the annoying costume prop from my mouth, Amy folded her arms. "Okay," she said. "Your turn. Explain." So I did. I told her about dinner at Rose's house, waking up in the park, the note, the costume, the missing phone and wallet, and the long walk home. Amy listened without interrupting. When I finally finished, she stared at me for several seconds. "So Rose did all this?" "I think Rose and Donna were involved." Amy shook her head. "I leave the neighborhood for one morning." She walked into the kitchen and sat down. "Tea." I blinked. "Tea?" "Yes. Tea. You look like you need it." While the kettle heated, I returned to the counter and examined the frozen keys. Amy watched me attack the ice again. "You're going to be there all day." "I know." "Then stop trying to destroy the counter." I reluctantly put the hammer down. We sat with our tea while the ice slowly melted. For almost 2 hours, Amy and I talked. Eventually, the frozen block finally surrendered the keys. Amy picked up the ring. "Well," she said, "let's get you out of this ridiculous outfit." One by one, she helped release the various costume fastenings. At last, I could finally change into normal clothes. Or at least, that was what I thought. I walked into my bedroom and opened my closet. I froze. "Something's wrong." Amy appeared behind me. "What?" I pointed inside. "My clothes." She looked. Then she started laughing. Someone had apparently replaced most of my everyday clothes with costumes and formal outfits. I opened another drawer. More costume pieces. Another drawer. Still more. Amy wiped her eyes. "Rose really planned this. This isn't funny." "It is a little funny." I gave her a look. She finally stopped laughing. "Okay. We'll figure something out." I searched everywhere for something ordinary to wear, but Rose had apparently anticipated every possible escape route. Amy sighed. "All right. Here's what we're going to do. I'll help you find something appropriate to wear, and then we're going to work out exactly what happened." She pointed toward the bedroom. "And after that, we're calling Rose." I stared at her. "Why?" Amy smiled. "Because I think it's time somebody turned the tables." I couldn't help smiling. For the first time that morning, I felt like I might actually be in control of the situation. Amy folded her arms. "But before we do anything else." She paused dramatically. "Here are the rules.